The Clemson Tigers are ACC champions of baseball. The field of 64 has just been announced, and Clemson will host a regional. Clemson's not won a regional since 2010, so we're excited to have it back in Clemson and try to advance out. To help me break this all down, we have the host of the Nachos Analysis podcast and the Ball Talk podcast, Drew Archer. Drew, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me on, Ryan.
Yeah, so before we get into this regional, let's talk a little bit about kind of what got us here. Clemson was pretty bad for a while. They were 16 and 14, 2 and 8 in the ACC. They got swept by UCF. They got swept by Wake. Honestly, I thought this was just a rebuilding year. I thought the pitching just wasn't there. Monty Lee just didn't leave enough. And I was kind of resigned to the fact that they weren't going to be very good this year, and maybe not next year either. Where were you at that point?
I never had any expectations of making, honestly, to a regional. I knew we would see signs of improvement, and those signs may not necessarily be in the wins and loss in the win column. When we were 2-8, I had. If you would have told me we would be talking about hosting a regional, a top 4 national seed right now, I thought you were crazy. But this has been an insane turnaround. You mentioned the Wake Forest series. That's when I kind of realized that this team's a little bit better than we thought, because they had the chance to win 2 of those 3 games and against stiff competition, and they've been on fire ever since.
Yeah, so they finished 43 and 17, 20 and 10 in regular season ACC play. Obviously, swept 4 games in the ACC tournament, won the ACC championship. They finished off on a 27 and 3 run. Their only losses there were to Notre Dame. They won that series, to Georgia and to Boston College, and they won that series. Then ended up playing them again and beating them in the ACC tournament. So let's go ahead and start talking about this regional. Initial reaction to seeing Tennessee as the 2 in the Clemson regional. What did you think?
We were kind of talking off air before you hit record. I was kind of in the same boat. I was a little frustrated and thought that Clemson might have got the raw end of the deal there. But after taking a few moments looking into it, I don't hate it. Tennessee has done very poorly on the road. I believe they're 4 and 12 maybe on the road right now. 2 of those wins came against South Carolina in the final regular season series. So I'm not as concerned with them. Now, they have some big wins. They've beaten some top opponents. Obviously, Tennessee is going to be the biggest discussion point in the tournament. They've won a game against LSU, Florida, Georgia, and LSU and Florida are highly ranked. But this is going to be the talk of it. But they're going to have their hands full, I think, in the first game with Charlotte. I think Charlotte might push them a little bit, which will be favorable towards Clemson the next day.
Yeah, so Charlotte won the Conference USA tournament. They're the 3. They're 67 in RPI. I think they're obviously a step up from Lipscomb. So Clemson will get Lipscomb, who's 90th in RPI first. They won the Atlantic Sun tournament, pretty low team batting average. But what stood out to me when I was kind of building this little chart, looking at some key stats here, is the home runs. Clemson, the least home runs of all of them, despite being the host and the number 4 national seed. And I think that's why I've enjoyed this team so much. Baseball and my background is my kind of real life job is heavy in statistics. So I'm not one of these anti-analytics guys, but I do kind of feel like it's taken the fun out of some sports. And baseball, especially, to me, home runs, walks, and strikeouts are not what's exciting. Steals, doubles, triples, that's what's exciting. And that's why this Clemson team is just such a pleasure to watch. They hit for high average, they steal, they take the extra base. And so their style is going to be pretty heavily contrasted with some of these other teams.
Absolutely. I can't remember which game it was off the top of my head, but it was one of the games in the ACC tournament. Tigers had 2 triples in the game, and it seems like they've come on with their home runs a little bit as the year has gone on. And the nice thing about Clemson, when they're hitting home runs, they're timely. They're when they need them. It's we're not living and dying by the home run ball like the previous staff kind of preached here at Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, Caden Grice is a great home run hitter, also the best pitcher on the team. But beyond that, it's more about timely hits What struck me most about this Clemson team is the ability to get 2 out hits. I've for years I've watched the Yankees, and there'd be 2 runners on, 1 out, and you'd see 2 guys in a row strike out. And this Clemson team is such a pleasure because they're like the exact opposite. They're not going to hit a bunch of solo shots in the 3rd inning or in the 7th inning when they're up 10, but they're going to manufacture runs with hits, not necessarily bunting guys over, but kind of a little bit of old school baseball. So let's kind of jump back to Tennessee before we move down to some of the other folks or other teams in this regional. So Tennessee swept Vanderbilt at home. They got 2 out of 3 from Kentucky, and as you mentioned, they took 2 out of 3 on the road in Columbia against the Cox. Their RPI is 20th. To me, that's pretty darn good for a 2 in the region with a 4, number 4 overall seed at Clemson. I was hoping to see Eastern Carolina, whose RPI is 26, or Maryland was kind of my guess at 35 in RPI. To me, even with their road record, not the most favorable draw, but that road record of 4-12 for Tennessee does make it a lot less scary.
Oh yeah, you have to feel good about that. And one little nugget here that I found in kind of researching, they're going to play Charlotte Friday night. Their Friday night pitcher, Andrew Lindley, is it Lindley or Lindsay? He transferred from Charlotte, so game 1 he'll be playing his former team there.
That's a cool little nugget.
Yeah.
Let's anything else on Tennessee? Otherwise, let's move to Charlotte and Lipscomb.
Nah, you said it all there. I think the win against Kentucky was a big one there, but I think the game being on Saturday, that the matchup would occur as long as Clemson and Tennessee both win Friday. I think the home field advantage is going to play a big part in that game, especially with their poor road record.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. I also really liked what Bakich did with the rotation, and I'm hoping that he uses Grice in the Saturday game against Tennessee, and you can go Gordon against what, in theory, you don't want to overlook anyone, but in theory, the easiest game is the first game against Lipscomb. Use Gordon, and then use Grice in the big game against Tennessee, and then follow it with Darden. To me, that's the play I would do. Is that what you're expecting? Is that what you would do?
I think Once they pitched Grice in the semifinal game this past weekend in the ACC tournament, I had a feeling that that's what it was going to be this weekend, which I like. I mean, your Tennessee is going to be your tougher opponent, and you want to throw your ace there. So I definitely agree. I think that's how it's going to set up.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's talk just briefly about Charlotte and Lipscomb. So Charlotte played Clemson in February, back when Clemson wasn't very good, and Clemson still won. Charlotte beat South Carolina back in March, and then they went on the road and they beat them again in May, and they beat Dallas Baptist too. And every team coming in is doing pretty well in their last 15 games. So no one's coming in plummeting or anything like that. But I think Charlotte could be a little tricky. I don't think they're a team to be overlooked.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to hang around after Clemson's game Friday night and watch that Tennessee Charlotte matchup. I think they're going to give them some problems. I think their best shot at getting a win would be Friday, because they're going to throw their ace there. And from what I understand, the rest of their pitching staff is not good enough to kind of compete through a whole regional. But one thing about that Clemson victory back early in the season, that was right before we got swept by UCF. And we actually had to score 4 runs. It was a tie ball game, had to score 4 runs to come back to win that game. So they gave us trouble back then, but I think these are 2 completely different teams right now.
Yeah, looking that far back is almost not helpful, but since they played, you gotta include it. Let me put this back up. To your point about ERA, that's to me what stood out the most about Charlotte and Lipscomb. ERA is hovering around 5 for both of them. Not the best pitching, so it makes sense what you're saying about Charlotte. And then Lipscomb 90th in RPI, 36 and 24, ERA over 5 as a team. So some pitching holes there. One note is they did beat Arkansas and Little Rock in May, so start of the month. So one game, not a series, but nevertheless, that does kind of remind you can't take even them lightly. But I do think that's they're pretty clearly the 4 seed for a reason.
Yeah, they did have a few midweek game victories that were some pretty big ones, like you mentioned. Arkansas, they beat Louisville. They already have played Tennessee. Tennessee beat them 10-0 back in March. So um, I, Tennessee's familiar with them. If they end up getting paired up with each other at some point, I don't think Lipscomb has a chance there.
Yeah, as much as, you want to pay respect to Lipscomb and Charlotte, I do think this is a Tennessee Clemson battle in the end. And, Clemson has not gotten out of regional since 2010. That includes 4 Clemson regionals. They lost 2011 to UConn. I believe that was the George Springer team. They lost to Oklahoma State in 2016, and then Vanderbilt in 2017, and Vanderbilt again in 2018. So, Omaha's on the back of the hats. That is the goal for the program. But, it's been a while since they were in the tournament. It's been a long while since they got out of a regional, home or just any regional. What are your expectations for this regional?
I think my expectation is for Clemson to win. I think the Tigers do win the regional, and I think the format of the super regional, if the Tigers do get out and win, sets up a little bit better for this pitching staff. But I expect the Tigers to win. Going back to what you're talking about, I'm very thankful not to have to listen to the Vandy Whistler this weekend in Clemson, because that's annoying. And I turned on the TV the other day, and evidently somebody from either ECU or Tulane has a Whistler in their fan base too, because that was all you could hear watching the broadcast.
Yeah, I was at one of those Vanderbilt regionals, and it was bad. I didn't care for it. So yes, like you said, the super regional format is just 2 out of 3. So Clemson can just use their weekend rotation and not have to get into sort of the funkiness of a 4th starter in college baseball, which is nice. And they're paired up with Auburn. So I thought it was interesting. You got a chance for revenge a little bit from football against Tennessee, and then you play the team that the softball team just knocked out of regionals in Auburn, if it all works out that way. Any final thoughts on this regional or a potential super regional on Auburn before we wrap up?
I don't know much about Auburn. My brother is a graduate of both Clemson and Auburn, so I shot him a text to get a little scouting report, but I hadn't heard back from him. But yeah, it's pretty cool how between baseball and softball, these matchups, if it works out for baseball. The one thing of note, the way the schedule worked out, Tigers play 1:00 on Friday, giving them a little bit more rest heading into Saturday's matchup. From a fan standpoint, not really excited about that. It looks like I will have to take Friday off from work. So, but I'm really looking forward to it. Like you said, it's been a while since we've hosted a regional in Clemson. Looking forward to another big game atmosphere out there at Doug Kingsmore Stadium.
Yeah, the difference between a regular season and postseason baseball is incredible. So I'm really looking forward to it. Drew, thanks for joining. Just you want to tell folks where they could find your podcasts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Nachos and Analysis on Twitter, and then you can find our podcast, the Ball Talk Podcast, or the College Football Show, anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple, Spotify. Ball Talk Podcast will wrap up here in a month or so when baseball season's over, and then a little break during the summer. And Matthew and I, my co-host for the College Football Show, will get things going sooner than it probably feels like for football.
And they can just search Nachos and Analysis.
Yep.
Awesome. Drew, thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. I had a good time. Hope you did too.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Ryan.
Yep. Thanks.